This is my childhood home. It has been in my family since right after World War II when my grandparents bought it. Up until recently, it has only been a house, but now I realize it's way more than that. It was my home. I think houses carry an energy with them, like ghosts that linger within the walls and the hallways. Like a photograph, they stand still in time and forever imprint on its space. No matter the damage, the number of tenants, or renovation could possibly ever change that. They stand forever, even if the memory is forgotten.
I don't mind other guys dancing with my girl. That's fine. I know them all pretty.
Probably the worst day of my teenage life happened on July 4th of my junior year in high school. Dad comes staggering into the kitchen, sits down at the opposite end of the table. He's got a shot glass full of whiskey and a beer with him, and I noticed that he was taking some pills. When I finally did look up to start talking to him, he's holding a German-made pistol that he had taken off a dead SS officer in World War II. He's holding this pistol, and it's at an angle where it's pointed directly at my chest. And I was so scared that I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't even make words, because he was sitting there and he was talking to me, but he was talking to me, but he was talking to a fellow from his unit in World War II who had been killed. He got up from the table and he walked out to the back porch, shouting and stomping his feet and yelling about how these dirty Nazi bastards were trying to ambush them, and he started firing the gun. And a friend of his who lived next door, named Jess, came out and was talking to him, saying, what's going on, Frank? And he's going, they're everywhere, these Nazi bastards. And he was gone. He was just absolutely gone at that point. I managed to get him back inside. I got the gun away from him, and I made him drink a couple cups of coffee. And I'm leading him up the stairs to his bedroom so that, he can sleep it off. Fucking front door practically blows off its hinges when a cop kicked it open. They came in full riot gear. I'm talking the vests, the helmet, the goggles. They had an attack dog, and somebody had a tear gas grenade. Dad turned around and charged these guys, and I couldn't stop him. Several guns went off, and there are still bullet holes in the walls of the house in places. And Dad was yelling for me. Gary, where are you? Will you come help me, please? And I was in tears. And in the fracas, Dad actually picked one officer up and threw him through the glass front door. And that's when they launched the tear gas, and it was just a big fucking mess. And then I forget how it happened, but I wound up getting shot in the ass. The bullet didn't stay. It went through went in one cheek and out the other. And I remember by the time I was able to stand up, all of the cops had gotten Dad out of the house, and there were several police cars in the area, and they had cordoned off the block. And there was a police car right in front of the house, but they didn't put him in that one. No, there was a police car like half a block up, and they marched him down the middle of the street. His pants were down around his waist, and you could see he was sick, he was crying, he had thrown up, and it was just the most god-awful moment because there was nothing I could do. That's the thing that got me seriously thinking about everything that we don't really know about our parents as human beings. Up till then, I had just looked at him as my dad who drinks. And when I looked out the window and saw them marching him up the street like that, that was the first time I ever really looked at him as a human being.
Well, the year was 1985, and it was my 17th birthday. We were geared up to do something fun. So my friends and I decided that we would throw a party in our backyard because it was big enough, and we'd had we could have a bonfire and everything. And we just called a few people, and we made up some flyers, and we went to the pool and put them up, told everybody there. And I told my parents that I was going to have a small party out back, and, they were fine with it. And it was the end of June, so it was hot. So they had the air conditioning on, and we had like parlor doors so they could shut it off, and they could like pretty much block off any noise from outside. And then from the outside, you could get into the bathroom through the basement door, so nobody actually had to go into the house. It started out pretty good. We got all the food set up and everything, and, most of the people that I knew that I had invited had showed up. We were having a good time and everything, and somebody wanted some wine coolers or something, so we went through this drive-thru because this one guy, he barely spoke any English, and as long as you took him some food, he'd sell us alcohol. And we got, back then they had these 2 liters of these wine coolers everybody liked. So we went through and got some of those, and by the time I got back, there were cars everywhere. It was just wall-to-wall people in my backyard. And I couldn't find the dog. Somebody tied the dog up in the neighbor's yard down the road. And there were cars everywhere. And I thought I better go into the house and see if my parents, know what's going on. So I went in and I go, "Oh, hey, what are you guys doing?" And they were just in there watching TV. And my dad goes, "Somebody must be having a party." He goes, "Look at all these cars." I was like, "Yeah, I know." And I said, "Well, okay." I said, "We'll be out back like that." And then it started to get really crazy. And I saw like this van pull up, and all these guys came out with all these big water coolers, and they'd made like this hairy buffalo punch. And then sooner or later, a fight broke out, which I was afraid would happen. And then the next thing I know, the cops came, and there was broken beer bottles everywhere. And it wasn't just the police. It was like the big vans, the paddy wagons. There was a fire truck and everything. And I mean, it was like Project X of the 1980s. And the whole time my parents were inside, didn't have a clue what was going on. And my brother came out. And I was like, "Don't tell Mom and Dad." He goes, "How am I supposed to do that? There's 10,000 cops around here." And then my dad figured it out. He came out, and he was mad. He was cussing up a storm, and I pretty much was grounded until senior prom.
Your cards on the table and the cat's in the cradle and your heart's been skipping.
Looking back now, sometimes it's hard to believe the adventures that Carl and I had. Carl was my best friend and neighbor for as long as I can remember. But we could have only been like 6 years old. And I remember our other neighbor, her name was Lexi. And she was kind of the neighborhood bully. It was wintertime, and she was beating up on Carl and myself, and she stole our Pokemon cards. It wasn't just a Pokemon card. It was a holographic Charizard Pokemon card.
So, pretty much what it was, I can't remember if it was your idea or my idea.
I remember patiently sitting at the window of my grandparents' house, and we were just waiting for them to leave.
We said, to hell with it. We want Pokemon cards because they had stole ours. And so we go through, the back door or whatever. And it's unlocked, which is the stupidest thing ever in that neighborhood.
I remember going inside. Carl and I ran through Alexi's room, just searching through everything to find these Pokemon cards. And Carl and I got this crazy idea of like, hey, we could take our revenge in here.
We decided at that point it was a good idea to wreck the living room. So we opened the front door, run outside to the driveway, and just start grabbing rocks and water, mud, whatever we could get our hands on, just start throwing it inside the living room.
I have no idea what was going through our mind when we were doing this, but at the time we thought it was a great idea.
I remember seeing the shadow of the car pull up through the big front window And it was just immediate, oh shit, we're
And then you went in through the back way, and Mom was probably asleep in the chair watching TV.
Carl and I run back inside and just act as if absolutely nothing has happened.
And it wasn't, maybe 30 seconds to a minute later, here comes Christy, bam, bam, bam. And Grandma, because she was sleeping at that time, she wakes up, she opens the door, and Christy was like, Eric and Carl were over here, and they trashed the house, and there's shit all over the living room, there's mud, and there's rocks.
She was so furious. I could still hear that pounding at the door. And she comes inside, and she starts yelling at my grandma that, Carl and I had broken into her house, and we destroyed the house.
Your grandma was just standing there defending. They've been here the entire time. What?
Oh, no, Christy, they've been upstairs the whole time. Don't you try and blame these little kids for this.
She truly believed that Carl and I had sat in that house and didn't do a thing because she was asleep. She defended us right to the end. After generations of living in this house, it became too old and expensive to repair. 2 years ago, my family moved out. All our memories left in a tomb. I was 23 the last time I walked these halls. For a school project, I had went into the abandoned house to take photographs. It was cold and musk. Dust had piled on the leftover boxes and appliances as if they had grown a new skin. I thought I would feel this layer of loneliness, but it was the opposite. I felt my first Christmas. I smelled onion bagels in the toaster. I felt my first kiss and my first heartbreak. The feeling was so overwhelming, I trembled as I tried to take the photos. This place looked nothing like my home. Like a disease was slowly eating away at it. The paint was chipping, the carpet was stained, and there were broken windows from kids that had been throwing rocks. It looked as if it was abandoned for decades. My grandparents are no longer with us, but when I look at these photos, they're very much alive. Within this frame is a small universe where my grandfather and I are still watching the 1960s Batman series on television. And my grandma has taken me to her weekly visit to the grocery store, where we pick up cake mix and popcorn for later that night. My sister and I still play spaceship outside, or at night we come inside and watch WWF wrestling. Somewhere within these frames, things are simpler and everything makes a lot more sense. I had this big plan to knock on the new tenant's door, explain who I was, and ask if I could go inside. I decided against that. I wanted to keep my memories separate from theirs. They had recently bought the house and began to repair it with new siding. This is their space now. They will create their own memories and small universes. I figure that's what's best. They have no connection with our memories, so how could they ever understand? I couldn't help but think. Every house we see sitting in neighborhoods or on the sides of streets all have their own small universes within them. Each house is a home to someone out there, and there are millions of ghosts wandering those walls. I couldn't help but think, sometimes you can't keep all your ghosts. So I decided to take one last photograph outside the house instead of going inside. This is the last of our universe within that home. We all smile and are all together, and that's exactly how I'd like to remember it.
I can't say I'm underrated, I can't say it's so. I can't say I'm underrated, but I know. She says watch your ego, baby, she says take it slow. She says that's a bad look, honey, I know. It gets so lonely inside my mind. I'm surrounded in love all the time. I get stuck